So in this part 2 of my making my Windows XP gaming PC, we're going to be taking a look at my graphics card choice. This is an EVGA GTX570, and this is pretty good period accurate for a first gen i5. But before we get into taking a look at this GPU, I wanted to talk about the drives and the power supply because I've pretty much decided what I'm going to use. And so starting with the power supply, we have this Corsair CX650M. Not super high-end, but this is definitely enough to drive a GTX 570 along with a Core i5 first gen CPU. You see the GTX 570 has a TDP of right around 225 watts. And then our first gen i5 is 73. So between those two parts, we're right around 300 watts, and a 650 is going to be more than enough. And moving on to our drive choices, the drive that I'm going to run Windows XP from is actually this 500 gigabyte Seagate, 7200 RPMs, and it is on a SATA interface. So that's going to run nice and quick, and definitely enough space for just about anything I could want in XP. And then I plan to dual boot this system with some other OS so that I can download games from the internet safely. And I'm not sure what OS that's going to be yet. I've contemplated Windows 10 with the extended security updates, or I might do some form of Linux. But whatever the case is, my secondary OS is going to go onto this Samsung 250 gig Evo, also obviously on SATA. The case has pretty much been decided as an Antec 300, but I haven't decided on a cooler yet, and that case is going to get its own video as I'm going to wind up doing some cleaning of that case. But kind of the primary thing that I want to focus on today is the GTX 570. This card could definitely use a little TLC, and one of the big things is I did already take this apart and redo the thermal paste, but I did it on top of the IHS. These chips, the 570 chips and 580 chips, they have a heat spreader on top of the actual GPU die, and the thermal paste underneath that can get all dried out. So I'm actually going to try and de-lid that today. Can't actually remember exactly how this thing comes apart, so I'm just going to kind of go in blind. And I'm going to start with a little slight loosening of the four main GPU screws. Then I'm going to give them each a little bit more of a turn. And then I will see if they come out all of the way after that. Beautiful. And we like to do this in a cross pattern to keep as little stress on that GPU die as possible, especially for something as old as this GTX 570. And note that there are a couple different models of the GTX 570. There is a 2.5 gig version, and this is not that. This is the 1.25 gig version. But for running games in Windows XP, having a little over a gig of video memory is certainly plenty, especially when most of the games that I'm going to be running are from like 2001 up through, I'd say probably through about 2010, 2009, somewhere around there. Basically anything after that is going to be compatible with more modern operating systems anyway. So I'm not too worried about it, because once I get into anything that's that new, I'd probably just wind up running it on my primary PC, which runs Windows 11, and skip out on running it on something that's old entirely, unless there was some specific compatibility issue. And I haven't really run into anything like that yet, so I'm not too concerned about it. We're just kind of getting all the screws out of the back of the card here, and then we want to see if I can lift this up and away from its cooler. I seem to remember I may have redone the thermal pad on this as well. Can't completely remember. It's been a little while since I did this. on this card, and I had some stuff go on in my personal life that if you've watched some of my stuff that I talk about in my Twitch content, then you're no doubt aware of what happened in my family last year. And so I actually redid the thermals on this card before all of that stuff started going down. And yeah, it kind of got me to a point where this whole project kind of fell on the back burner. I'm seeing some more screws on the edges of the shroud here. I'm going to get those removed. And those are a different length from the other ones that I've removed already, so I'm going to set those in a separate place. And then see what we can get figured out in getting this thing taken apart the rest of the way. Here's one more here. There we go. And then I think there's a couple of them on the top side. Yep, there's 3. No. Yeah, there's 3. Because there's one on this kind of diagonal here. I don't know if this is all necessary or what, but I'm just kind of taking out all the screws I can see and kind of going from there. There's one here, and then the final one that I know of is the very corner, right by the PCI Express connections for the power. Alright. And I'm going to lay the card down and see if we are able to just kind of lift. Well, the shroud comes off with no problems. And then what about the rest of the cooler here? Am I able to get this to come up? I'm not sure. I am being extra cautious here, and I really just don't want this to have a problem. Oh, we're starting to lift away here. Got it really stuck down on there. Yep, there we go. That was a pretty okay coverage, but not great. I can certainly try and do better this time around. And yeah, we've got, looks like we do have some screws on the end of the card. These are holding the kind of coverage plate on. We'll need those to come out if we're going to try and delid this chip. And then once we have those off, that should be everything that's holding this this together. I see that we've got our fan connector right here, so we'll make sure to unplug that before we go any further. Don't want to cause any damage there. Here we go. And then, yeah, I'm not seeing how exactly that is secured down. It's probably screwed in from underneath, so yeah. And all of that just kind of lifts away, and yes, my replacement thermal pad job here from last year. And it looks like all of these did make contact where they needed to, so that's a good sign. And here we have our lidded chip. And basically this is held in with some glue that's underneath. But the first thing I want to do is actually just clean off the surface of this. We got some rubbing alcohol on our paper towel here, and we got quite a bit of... Yeah, I might wind up just delaying this and doing PTM 7950, depending on, I guess, how successful I am at getting the lid off, because I haven't ever done this before. This is going to be my first time trying to delid a chip, and I'm not really 100% sure if it's going to be successful or if I'm going to cause some damage or something. I really hope I don't, because, you know, they're obviously not making these chips anymore, and I'd hate to cause damage, but at the same time, running it without doing any maintenance to it, it might be just as bad. So yeah, here's our chip. It's a GF110-275-A1, and you can kind of see the engravings there from NVIDIA that are lighter. But yeah, from what I understand as far as delidding a chip like this, it's best to kind of start in this lower corner. And what you want to do is, you can kind of see there's substrate, and then there's the actual lid. And you want to try and cut kind of through the glue that's underneath there. So I have a knife here that I'm going to be using, a kind of a flat razor blade for this. And so, just being extremely cautious, I'm going to try and make sure that this is lined up exactly where it needs to be. And yeah, we want to see if I can get this started in exactly the right spot. Yeah, this is extra stuck down. Maybe I should try starting from a different spot on the chip. I don't want to knock anything loose, but oh, so this corner started a lot easier. And I was actually able to get underneath a little bit. It's going to be a little hard to see, but yeah, we're actually underneath the chip slightly right now. I've come to understand that you can kind of get far underneath and not have to worry about it. Because the dies on these are a lot smaller than the heat spreader is. And that's, yeah. I'm going to check and see. I might have a different blade for this. Yeah, so I'm basically not getting anywhere with this adhesive. So I am going to start hitting it with my heat gun, just right around the die area, a little bit. I'm going to take the razor away first so it doesn't get superheated, and then I'm going to see if that allows me to more easily cut through this adhesive. Now I gotta be super careful and work kind of quickly while it's still warm, and see if I can't get a little farther this time. Oh geez, I think I got farther that time. So I'm actually letting this cool for a minute, but I'll let you guys in on what I did to kind of get it loosened here. I had managed to get the razor underneath the one corner there, and I really just was having no luck getting it to move anywhere after that. So what I wound up doing was just using a heat gun, and I used it straight on the die, and at first I was trying to see if maybe I could heat it up a little bit and cut a little bit and heat it up and cut, and it was not working. So I got the razor underneath as far as I could on this corner, and then just started blasting the thing with heat for a good solid 30 seconds. And then I started trying to gently pry up on the razor blade, and just having that hot enough got it to the point where it was able to release all of the rest of the... Yeah, that's still super hot. release all of the adhesive there. And so there you have it. It's a good thing I did it that way too, because if you look at the kind of edge of the adhesive here, I was barely making any progress. So I'm glad that I was able to get it the rest of the way that way. And yeah, there is our thermal paste application that was on the inside of this thing. Definitely completely dried. And what I'm really curious about with this card is the height of the actual GPU cooler block. And I'm curious if it has enough, I guess, wiggle room to be able to use this without that heat spreader at all. I'm willing to try it. I have plenty of thermal paste, and I'm just curious. So I think I'm going to try reassembling this without that cover, and I want to see how our spread comes out on the actual thermal paste. If it's going to be full coverage or if we're not going to make contact at all. I guess we'll have to see. But yeah, that's what that die looks like after it's completely cleaned. There's no markings on it. It's just because NVIDIA never expected you to delit it. So they put all of their markings kind of right on this part. And it does add a tiny bit of height, and it's even less when you account for that. So it's totally possible that when I would remount the copper cooler on here that it would make contact, but it's kind of, I have to try it and see. So that's kind of exactly what we're going to do here. I'm going to get the bare die GPU put back together here, get some screws in, and afterward we'll put some thermal paste on there. And then throw some screws in here to kind of hold this all together. All right, got all of our back screws in place, obviously aside from the 4 that hold the actual block on. But I just wanted to take a second and look at how cool that looks with the exposed die. Yeah, I think that's super neat. So I'm just doing this as a test, and I know that's not enough thermal paste for this, but I just kind of want to drop this cooler in and flip it over. I'm going to throw in our 4 screws and secure it down, and I'm going to see if I get any contact at all. And obviously with this arrangement, I need to be even more careful than I normally would be when it comes to, you know, screwing in the screws evenly and kind of going slow, because putting too much pressure on one corner, yeah, that can just crack the die like immediately. So yeah, that's now screwed down all of the way. And now to remove it again and see what kind of coverage, if anything, we got on that die. All right, 4 screws are out, moment of truth. No, that is like no contact. All right, yeah, we still have to use the spreader, unfortunately, but it is what it is. The one piece of good news with this, though, is that at least we can clean off all of the old thermal paste that was underneath here, and we can get this a lot better. That's kind of an initial cleaning. Let's do a little better job with some alcohol. This Q-tip is soaked in some 91% isopropyl alcohol. So this will give us a nice clean surface to start off with. And we do have a couple little specks of stuff hiding in the corners here, so I'm going to try and get that all up while we're in here. And that's looking a decent amount better. So it's the next day. I actually got really tired after I finally got this all kind of situated here. And I was trying to decide whether I wanted to invest in PTM 7950 pads for underneath the heat spreader, this thing here. I was trying to decide whether I wanted to invest in one for there and then one for on top. The thing is, they're kind of pricey. The ones that I was looking at, it's like almost $20 for a piece that would be big enough to cover both of those things. So I've decided I'm just going with traditional thermal paste, and I'm just going to do a nice spread. And so I've given it a nice kind of pattern here. This should be conducive to good coverage once the actual heat spreader is put down, but I am just taking a spudger tool here, and I'm going to make sure that the entire thing gets a nice covering, mainly because when you're talking about direct die cooling, you do want it to be extremely good coverage. You can run into situations where just a tiny amount of the die winds up being not covered and not having good thermal contact with the heat spreader, and that winds up being what's called a hot spot, and you wind up with the entire GPU or whatever other chip it might be. The entire thing winds up throttling because of this one spot on the chip that's not making good contact. That one spot is reaching super high temperatures, and then the entire chip slows down because it can't just slow down that one part, you know, and you wind up with a situation like that. So just taking the spudger here and kind of like matting it down a little bit. I might need to add a little bit more here to make sure we get really good coverage on the entire thing. And then once that is completely covered, then we're going to move to putting the heat spreader down on top. All right, now that we've got kind of a mostly even covering there, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but we do want it to be completely covered. And then I'm going to just kind of drop this heat spreader back into place. And then I'm just going to kind of make sure that it is lined up. And then just give it a little wiggle treatment here to get the good contact with the die. And that should be good. Nice. And now, since I've just manhandled the top of that heat spreader with my thumbs, pressing it down to get good contact, I am going to go ahead and re-clean it with some isopropyl alcohol. I just need to do this kind of gently, because I don't want to shift this around at all. I've already pressed it down. Don't want it shifting or anything like that. I just want to get whatever oils were on my thumbs off of here. And I know that I was handling that quite a bit. So we'll do that. And then we'll use the dry end to kind of expedite getting that totally dry and ready for thermal paste. Nice. Now, when it comes to me putting thermal paste on the actual heat spreader itself, it's a lot less critical to make sure the whole thing is covered. I'm actually just going to do a pattern like what I had before I started spreading underneath. And now that we've got our pattern in place, we're going to go ahead and place our cooler down on top. But we also want to make sure that once it's down, we don't want to shift it around very much, because I don't want to move the heat spreader around. And so I might actually do this backwards. I might flip the whole thing, and then that way I can see where I'm lining things up. It should work. It's my first time doing this, so we'll see how it goes, and hopefully that heat spreader doesn't just fall right off. I think with the, I think it'll get held in place though. I think it'll get held in place by the thermal paste being underneath it. We'll see. I don't know if that's making any contact at all. I'm going to do it this way because I can't see what I'm doing the other direction. There we go. Yeah. They're in place. And I did just remember that, yeah, once I have that down, I actually need to, because the height of the rest of it is higher than the cooler part. So I do need to actually get a couple of screws at least started to hold this in. Get that corner to thread a couple times. And I'm just checking my... Yeah, I look like I'm all lined up here, so we can go ahead and get the other two corners. All right. We're all sandwiched in place there. So now I can just start tightening. And yeah, we do have to be a little bit more cautious now because that heat spreader can move. We're solid now. Perfect. All right, and kind of the last step here, we're going to get the shroud back in place. And this is going to allow us to get the right cooling. And I have all the screws here that need to go in. And start getting our screws back in for this. And then, yeah, we have some that are along the top side of the card as well. And can't forget about the one that's at an angle over here towards the front of the card, as that's going to be the last one I put in. And, yep, here's that final one that's a little bit tricky. It's a more of an angle. Nice. Fully delidded, repasted GTX 570. Now I get to find out if it works or not, because this is my first time ever delidding, and I hope I didn't kill it. Okay, we're back in my lab here, and this is going to be such a moment of truth for me. I really hope that that this works, because this was a large time investment, and it would be super unfortunate if my first delidding project resulted in a dead GPU. But you know what? If anything happened to it, at least I can chalk it up to this being quite a learning experience. How to delid NVIDIA graphics cards from this time frame. And I guess we'll see what happens here and see if we get a nice beep for the post. We got a beep for the post, and we are here. I am quite happy with this, and quite relieved, to be frank about it. Yeah, our GTX 570 from EVGA, it has been delidded and repasted, and at least we're up and running to post. I'm going to have to run some stress tests on this after the fact. But, boy, am I glad I didn't kill this card. Thanks for watching, guys. And we'll have a part 3 here coming up very soon, where we're going to continue on with the project of making this Windows XP gaming PC. Take care.